Good morning, girls. Yes, it's time for another chapter and adventure. What will Mrs. Pepperpot get up to today? The chapter is called Mrs. Pepperpot's Penny Watchman. Strange things had been happening in Mrs. Pepperpot's house. It all began when a little girl came to the door selling penny raffle tickets for a tablecloth. Mrs. Pepperpot hunted high and low until she found a penny. It was a nice shiny one because someone had been polishing it. But just as she was writing her name on the ticket, the penny dropped on the floor and rolled into a crack by the trapdoor to the cellar. "Bang goes my fortune," said Mrs. Pepperpot as she watched it disappear. "Now I won't be able to buy a raffle ticket after all. But I can't let you go without giving you anything. What about a nice homemade shortcake?" And she stood on a stool to reach the cake tin. It was empty. Mrs. Pepperpot turned the tin almost inside out, but there was no sign of any shortcake. "I can't understand it," she said. "I baked 2 whole rounds of shortcake on Friday. Today it's only Monday, and the tin is empty. Very mysterious. But I've got something you might like even better, little girl." So saying, Mrs. Pepperpot opened the trapdoor to the cellar and went down the steps to fetch the big jar of bramble jelly she had left over from the summer. Before I read on, here are some pictures, girls. Here's Mrs. Pepperpot turning the tin almost inside out, thinking, "Oh goodness me, where have the cookies gone?" And over here, there's the cellar. What will she find down there? But what a sight met her eyes. "Goodness gracious and glory be!" she exclaimed, for the big jar of bramble jelly was lying smashed under the shelf with the jelly gently oozing out over the floor. From the sticky mess, a little trail of mouse footprints ran across to the chimney. There was nothing for it. Mrs. Pepperpot had to go up to the little girl and tell her she couldn't even have bramble jelly. But the little girl said it didn't matter a bit and politely curtsied before going on to the next house. What a polite little girl she is. Mrs. Pepperpot took a mousetrap and went down the cellar steps again. She baited it with cheese and set it very carefully on the floor. When it was done, she turned to go upstairs again, but the hem of her skirt brushed against it, and snap went the trap with a corner of her skirt caught in it. That was bad enough, but then, if you please, she shrank again. "Now I really am stuck," she told herself, and she certainly was. She couldn't move an inch. After she had sat there a while, she saw a young mouse peeping over the edge of an empty flower pot. "You're quite safe to come out," said Mrs. Pepperpot. "I am too well tethered to do you any harm at the moment." But the little mouse darted off to an empty cardboard box, and then 2 little mice popped their noses over the edge. "1 and 1 makes 2, said Mrs. Pepperpot. "I learned that at school, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you fetched a 3rd one, for 1 and 2 make 3. She was right. The 2 little mice darted off together and stayed away quite a long time while she sat and waited. Suddenly, she heard a tinny little sound. Bing! Bing! And a big mouse came walking towards her on his hind legs, banging a shiny gong with a little steel pin. The shiny gong was Mrs. Pepperpot's lost penny. The big mouse bowed low. "Queen of the house, I greet you." The little mice were peeping out from behind him. "Thank goodness for that," said Mrs. Pepperpot. "For a moment I thought you might be coming to gobble me up. You're so much bigger than I." "We're not in the habit of gobbling up queens," said the large mouse. "I just wanted to tell you, you have a thief in your house." Mrs. Pepperpot snorted. "Thief indeed! Of course I have. You and all the other mice are the thieves in my house. Whose penny is it you're using for a gong, may I ask?" There's Mrs. Pepperpot, and there's the tall mouse she's chatting to. "Oh, is that what it is? A penny?" said the big mouse. Sorry for that little interruption, girls. Here is the source of that little bit of barking, Louie and Charlie. They've promised to be quiet for the rest of the story. So I'll just repeat that first sentence again. "Oh, is that what it is? A penny?" said the big mouse. "Well, it rolled through a crack in the floor, you see, so I thought I could use it to scare away the thief and to show I'm the watchman in this house." "You really do need a watchman, queen of the house, to keep an eye on things for you." "What nonsense," said Mrs. Pepperpot. She tried. Oh, I'm sorry, I just lost my way. Oh, I really have lost my way. Where was I up to? Okay, "what nonsense," said Mrs. Pepperpot. She tried to stand up, but it was rather difficult with her dress caught in the trap and she herself so tiny. "Take it easy, queen of the house," said the big mouse. "Let my son here tell you what he has seen." Timidly, one of the little mice came forward and told how he had climbed up the chimney one day and peeked through a hole in the kitchen. There he had seen a terrible monster who was eating up all the cake in the tin. Then the other little mouse chirped in to tell how he had been playing hide and seek behind a jam jar on the shelf when the monster had put out a huge hand and taken the jar away. But he had been so scared when he saw the little mouse that he had dropped the jar on the floor and all the bramble jelly came pouring out. Suddenly they heard tramp, tramp, tramp. Up above, the sound of huge boots walking about. "That's the monster," said one of the little mice. "Yes, that's him all right," said the other little mouse. "Is it indeed?" said Mrs. Pepperpot. "If only I could get out of this trap, I should very much like to go and have a look at this monster." "We'll help you," said all the little mice, and they set to work to free Mrs. Pepperpot from the trap in the way only mice know how. They gnawed through her skirt, leaving a piece stuck in the spring. "Now you must hurry up to the kitchen to see the monster," they said. "But how am I to get there?" asked Mrs. Pepperpot. "Up through the chimney on our special rope. We'll pull you up." And that's what they did. They hoisted Mrs. Pepperpot higher and higher inside the chimney until she could see a chink of light. "That's the crack into the kitchen," the big mouse told her from below. She called down to him, "Thank you, Mr. Watchman. Thank you for your help, and keep a sharp lookout." Then she climbed through the hole in the wall. As soon as she set foot on the floor, you guessed it, she grew to her normal size. Standing in front of the stove, She put her hands on her hips and said, "So it's you, husband, is it, who's been eating all my shortcake and stealing the bramble jelly in the cellar?" Mr. Pepperpot looked dumbfounded. "How did you know that?" he said. "Because I have a watchman now. I have paid him a penny," said Mrs. Pepperpot, and there she is, standing with her hands on her hips. So, girls, did you enjoy Mrs. Pepperpot's penny watchman? Who was the penny watchman? Did you guess it was the big mouse? And who was the monster? Did you hear that in the story? The monster wasn't a monster at all. It was Mr. Pepperpot sneaking some shortcake from Mrs. Pepperpot's tin. In the activity in your book, girls, at the top it says Mrs. Pepperpot's penny watchman. The first thing you need to do is write 5 things that happened in the story, from the story, that were not very good. So you really are just finishing the sentence. Number 1, a penny. Think of what happened at the start of the story, a penny. 2, the cake tin. 3, the jar of jelly. 4, Mrs. Pepperpot's skirt. And 5, Mrs. Pepperpot. So 5 things that happened in the story that were not very good. If you can't remember, girls, just go back and listen to those parts of the story instead of leaving gaps, perhaps. Now, jar of jelly, what is that? Did you hear Mrs. Pepperpot talking about bramble jelly? Well, that's really like blackberry jam, which is very yummy, blackberry jam. The next activity, it said then things went better. The big mouse was friendly and called Mrs. The something freed her. Freed means made her free, and hoisted her up. Hoisted, what does hoisted mean, girls? Hoisted is a word that's the past tense of the base word hoist. And when you hoist something up, you raise or you lift it up, usually with some sort of mechanical means. You might have like a pulley rope or something like that. And as you pull the rope, something will go up, like hoist a flag. When we raise a flag, you might have seen that happen at school, hoisting a flag up. So, the something freed her and hoisted her up the, do you remember when Mrs. Pepperpot wanted to go upstairs to see who the monster was? How did she get up? It was inside something, and the mice told her how to get there by holding onto something. So on up, then the monster and was really just, so who was the monster? We talked about it before, didn't we? And then you can colour in the pictures and post it to your teacher. Have a lovely day, girls. I hope you've enjoyed hearing Mrs. Pepperpot from the treetops at Mrs. Watkins' house.